I want to talk about gear because there's been a lot of different games and there's been a lot of evolution in gear. I think a lot of people get confused sometimes or overwhelmed perhaps when they look at sim now and some of the stuff certainly going on during this lockdown that we're all kind of in. And they don't really know where to start. And you can start pretty humble and you can get pretty insane. And I kind of want to go through all of that. So Steve, maybe starting with you, where did you start and how have you seen it grow? And, is it really that necessary?
Yeah, it has changed a lot, and it is very confusing. I think a lot of people look at it and they're not sure if they should get this wheel or that wheel or what equipment they should get. I mean, for me, I think my first wheel was I seem to remember playing the Toka series with a wheel. So probably even back in the early 2000s that I first had a wheel, but you don't have to. I mean, you can really easily get into a lot of racing on a controller. Probably not the more hardcore PC sims, but a lot of racing games on consoles at least you can just get into with a controller. But there is a massive spectrum of equipment. Like you can really spend thousands on a top end rig, but you don't really have to. I think for the most part, it's probably about 90% down to how good the driver is, and then the last 10% is about your equipment.
That's a pretty strong statistic because I think a lot of people debate that. I think, look, I've done it. I've said, if I had direct drive, I'd be that fast, or if my load cell was more accurate, I'd brake better. But yeah, I think you might be right. There's something about that in terms of the driver. And Jann, you've got a pretty impressive rig there as well. I see you're actually like sitting in a cockpit right now. What you said you started on Fanatec, but I know you tweeted out. What's your feel on gear? Do you think that do you agree, kind of 90% driver still?
I think in PlayStation and Xbox land, I don't think gear makes that much big difference. You can certainly be competitive with a controller, and then everybody else on a wheel on those console games. But with PC, I've only just got into PC iRacing. I've been playing for the last month or so, and it makes a big difference. There's so much choice you can have, and there's so much difference in gear that can make difference in lap times as well, and also how you set it up. So I'm renting currently. Everybody's on lockdown all over the world, and I'm not racing. My first 3 rounds, by the time this goes out, of SUPERGT is being postponed. Initially it was 1, now it's 3. All the testing. I had meant to be a testing today, but it's been cancelled. So everybody's on iRacing. Everybody, all the racing drivers, all on iRacing. And there's been some cool events going out there. And that's why I want to get involved. There's a company local in Tokyo I go to who have some simulators. They do corporate dues and in China. And of course, their business isn't doing so well because everything's shut down everywhere. So me and my roommate, Nick, we said, okay, we'd rent them for 2 months until the end of May. And these rigs called hyper simulators. And we have like a Fanatec wheel, and I don't know what the pedals are, but I think they're load cell.
Yeah, feel free if you can. You can move the camera and show us. I don't know if you're capable.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. There's one of them. We've got two in a room. So yeah, Fanatec wheel. I don't know if you can see the pedal right there. And this screen, I bought this literally 3 days ago, and it was that one. But man, the refresh rate was so bad on those triple screens. And I did that race with all the drivers last weekend, and I was nowhere. I was struggling with my screen. I was like, look, I need to get a proper screen.
So you've gone for the gear excuse already.
No, for real, it makes a difference. And I'm not like putting out driver excuses or whatever, but man, it made a difference. And I just want to have fun as well. And I was slow. So what I've done now today I've actually bought some more gear. I bought my own rig, so a company called SimLab. They do like a frame. So I ordered that like a few hours ago. I spoke with another driver here in Tokyo who's selling his direct drive wheel and some fancy pedals. So I'm in now. I'm like all in. Like,
wow.
Gear. Yeah,
I love the cockpit aspect of you guys having two just like monococks sitting in a room right now.
Yeah. It's cool, man. Like we've got a fridge as well. Actually, this is another thing. We've got like a fridge there.
It's perfect.
stack it up of Corona, and while we're driving, we can pass stuff to each other. Of course, I don't recommend drink driving in real life, but
yeah, of course, no, of course. Steve, back to you. I want to focus a little bit at what you said though at the start, because Logitech, kind of what are you on now, and Logitech strapped to a desk. Where does the immersion factor become important to people? And like I say, you played many different games. Is there some games maybe that are more sensitive than others to certain wheel choices?
Oh, definitely. I mean, like Jann was saying, that the PC sims equipment does matter a little bit more, because like the physics are more sensitive to every little difference. So the more realistic it gets, the more the equipment matters, I think. So if you have like an entry level wheel, you won't feel so much in through the steering, and therefore you probably won't be quite as quick or as consistent. So now I've got like a direct drive wheel, so you get really good feedback, and therefore it makes you a little bit quicker. So you don't have to go on the expensive route.
Yeah, sure.
I think for the realistic sims, it does help for sure.
Yeah, and just to those that are watching that maybe don't know the difference, there's gear-driven, belt-driven. I'm sure there's others, but the main three would be gear-driven, belt-driven, and direct drive, which determine force feedback. Gear would be sort of your Logitech, which basically is a plastic spine on a gear from the motor that provides that vibration feedback, and it tends to be a little more harsh. The belt's much quieter and a little smoother and a little stronger, which is kind of what I've got behind me on Fanatec, and I think you've got the same base right now, Jann, before you look to go to direct drive. And then obviously direct drive is the engine, has a shaft straight off of it, straight into your hands. You can put crazy amounts of Newton meters into those wheels. They feel, and I've been fortunate enough to try a few of them, they feel incredible. But you can, it's one of those, if you hit the wall, take your hands off the wheel at times, because they can be pretty insane. I think feedback's pretty impressive. The first time I used it, I remember I came off of the GT Sport, one of my first wheels, the one I mentioned, had none. And then the first time I used it, it was like a whole different sensation, and I felt instantly more confident in driving. So I would recommend starting, something like a Logitech. But to your defense, Steve, in terms of going faster, I'm not any faster in what I have here. It just makes the experience a lot better, I think. And that's sort of, I think, important, but also where you've done so much, is it important to pick something that maybe is more similar to Formula, more to GT? Is there a comfort that you need to go with if you're in long hours, or is there, are you trying to make it as close to a real car as you can? What's important for you?
Yes, it's a good question. I mean, for me, it's normally the number one priority is I want to go quick. That's the absolute
fair
number
enough.
one. So, yeah, so I compromise everything else just for pure speed. Not that I have all of that, but I mean, it's just really down to each individual, isn't it? You can go fully for immersion. You want more really good detail. You want probably a bigger screen, or like a curved screen, so you feel a bit more immersed in the screen. But at the same time, there's some really good iRacing players, for example, who play with almost no force feedback at all. So they're not going for realism in any regard. They're just going all out for speed in whatever way they feel comfortable. So it's just really down to what the individual wants. But for me, I like to be immersed, and I mainly also go for speed at the same time. So a bit of a mix.
Right. And Jann, obviously you're sitting in a Formula cockpit. You've done some Formula in the past. You originally were set to be a Formula guy. You really were chasing that, but now you're in a GT. Does that matter to you that you have to be in a similar seating position?
I do want to rig, and the stuff I have ordered, the chassis I have ordered, is similar to the seating position in Super GT. So it's not like a Formula 3 position, but it's like kind of like a halfway house, almost like a McLaren GT3 car. Their seats are quite laid back, and for me, I want something as close to what I have in real life. So the feedback that I get, not the strength, because that's irrelevant. It's more the feedback and all the small details and nuances you get in real life through your hands, and obviously with the simulator with many wheels. Well, simulator driving in general, you miss the sensation you get through your ass and through your back. There's no G, and you don't feel the load through in your backside. All you've got is your hands and your eyes. So that information needs to be perfect. And I don't know, for me, I feel it's even more for drivers that have driven and then they go to simulators. It's sometimes really difficult to kind of be quick on a sim because you're missing an element that you get in real life. And I don't know if that's true for me way back, or it's just an excuse for me to get good gear, and then I feel better about it, and then I'm probably going to go quicker anyway.
Well, this is a whole other topic that I'd love to get into a little bit as well. Is where does sim draw the line in terms of realism? Because I feel like iRacing lately. Now, look, I'll say it, and they can hate me for it. I'm not a big fan of the current tire model. I like that it does take time to heat up. It lasts a little longer. You can get more consistent laps out of it once you're at running speed. That's all fine. But I feel like they've gone for this hyper-realistic sensation where they've gone and got the front axle close. But you're right. There's no ass. And Rosenquist touched on this last week too. I can't feel what's going on necessarily in the back of the car. Whereas Simbin used to have one of my absolute favorite series, which was the Race On GTR Evolution series. And the guy who made the physics for that, I read on a forum once, and he's since left the company, but he said, I didn't build it to be realistic. I built it to be realistic and then adapted it to sim. In other words, I put as much feel in the wheel as I could so you could get as much information. I know this is a bit of a hard question maybe to answer. There might not be a right answer, but in your opinion, Jann, what is more important? Do you want it to be hyper-realistic, or would you rather have as much feel so that you can at least simulate that back end?
Last month was the first time I started playing with iRacing, and my first comment was it's too difficult. I don't feel the rear, and I feel that it's too difficult sometimes, especially just to pick up. And real race cars aren't that. They're difficult to drive, but it's not like that. You feel the rear, and I don't know how they would implement that without some kind of motion or some kind of vibration. I'm not too sure. I do remember those Simbin games. I had one on PlayStation. Was it Xbox? They did like a...
Yep. GTR Evo, I think, was a crossover. Yep.
Yeah, and that was ace. I loved that game. It was proper hardcore. I remember doing a series on that. That was good with a controller, but yeah, it was. You could tell. iRacing's tire model. Specifically, the front feels great. The front feels the best of any sim I've tried. Like, there's so much detail, and there's the way that you load the front tire is really quite accurate. But the rear, it's really, especially like mid-engine cars, it's I really feel it. You have like a slide and then you spin. It's
and to exactly that point, the BMW M8 GTE, I can trail brake that and slam it to an apex. The Porsche, I touch the brakes sometimes and I'm just backwards, and it's sideways before because I don't feel that back end. And maybe that's where iRacing becomes one of those games like gear is important. Maybe if you had motion, that matters.
I think also steering wheel as well, direct drive stuff helps with that, especially with the feel thing. I mean, if you don't have that, then there's no chance.
Well, and Steve, and maybe this is where you can comment because you would have played so many different sims. Is that taking it maybe too far to be accessible to everyone? And is that necessarily not... I guess, is there better alternatives for people who just maybe necessarily want to have fun, or that are better feedback overall for a driving experience?
Yeah, I would certainly say that, let's say, R Factor 2 and iRacing, those sorts of sims are very much on that end of the scale where this is where you're probably going to spend a lot on your equipment and a lot on subscription cost, and you're here because you want a really realistic experience, and it's probably not very accessible for most people, but it's good that it exists. I mean, there's other games you can always play if you want a slightly sort of more accessible experience, certainly on console. Something like Gran Turismo, very easy to get into, slightly dumbed down physics, if that's the right way to say it, compared to R Factor, compared to iRacing. But
sure,
you still have a really good racing experience for a lot.
Do you think that there is cost? Do you think there still is an important to balance though? Like I say, like when for example, with GTR Evo, I would get out of a car Or I get out of the sim and get into a car and I'd feel confident. Whereas iRacing, sometimes I'm like, I don't even know if I can drive anymore. Like, you just have to change and adapt so much without that feeling. Do you think maybe there is a point where Sims can go too far with trying to simulate realism and they have to remember we aren't real? Let's make it as close and like, is feel more important than the actual, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would always prefer feel because I did the Sebring 12 hour very recently.
Yep.
And I did 6 hours of that race myself. I did about 6 hours preparing for it as well. And even after all that, I still wasn't confident of driving the car. I must have done like hundreds of laps and I still didn't really know what I was doing with the car. So something like ACC, I feel a lot more confident because the physics and the feel of it feels a lot better. But I'd say this is actually a disadvantage maybe of sometimes being a real racing driver because you rely so much on your feel through your seat in a real car. And then when you play a sim, you don't get that. And actually, sometimes it makes it harder.
Yeah.
So if you didn't have a real life experience, actually, it might be easier just to do sim only.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously feels important. Immersion's important. As VR gets better, I know I've tried it. The first gen for me, when I had friends over, they sat down, they put it on, and they were wowed. They're sitting in a car, and that was, even for me, that was cool. Looking around the Porsches and the BMWs and say, wow, look, the roll cage has actually got the same kind of bracing, and it's pretty unique, but I didn't quite think that it was there in terms of resolution. I couldn't quite see into the apexes the way I wanted. I'm also a kind of guy that has my keyboard next to me and some binds and things that I need to reach out to. I found that difficult. Bit sweaty, but there's no doubt that the technology is developing. First and foremost, I guess your impressions on it. Is it something that could improve maybe the lack of feel in the back end due to the more motion? And do you see it maybe even being the future in sim, Steve?
I could certainly see it again a lot better. You know, give it 5 years or something, and like you said, the resolution. I felt like it was a really cool experience, but I wouldn't want to use it competitively because I couldn't really, see what I was doing. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
The resolution wasn't quite there, but I think it could be because it could be the future. Because you think, in terms of VR, a lot of VR requires you to move about, like walking around a room, but with racing, you're just sitting down in a rig holding the steering wheel, so it's kind of perfect in that sense that you don't have to move about. You just sat there and you can just look around inside the car. I'm not sure how that will translate into feeling the car, but it will certainly give you a lot of immersion, much more than you can get from just a normal screen, even a triple screen. So if you want immersion, that's going to be the number one solution for sure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Jann, I don't know if you've tried VR yet. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have similar thoughts to Steve with the not being able to see into apexes so much. And but when I have used it, I used it last week, like a second generation version of it, and I was really impressed how immersive it was. And I was on a street circuit on iRacing, and I was so close to the walls, closer than I would have been using a normal screen. So like my spatial awareness was much better with VR, but it was more difficult to look far ahead and kind of I was reacting to things rather than like incidents in front. I was reacting rather than kind of seeing it in my peripheral or seeing it far in the distance without actually directly looking at it. So once the resolution maybe gets better, that would be good. But yeah, I kind of found it claustrophobic as well. I don't know why. I just felt like I was in a race, and after 4 laps, I was like, I just need to get this off. I want the race to finish because, I don't know, I just felt a bit weird with it.
Yeah, I know some people get motion sickness. My dad put it on for like 5 minutes and was like, never again. He's like, that's really cool. Loved it. Not doing it again. But I guess you said you did second gen. I haven't really done any of the newer gens yet. Is it possible that if that resolution improves, it could be viable alternative even in the competitive world?
Yeah, I mean, if the thing could be like 4K and you can see how you would see in real, well, obviously our eyes aren't 4K, but if you could look,
I get what you mean,
far into the distance, you know, then it'd be amazing. I'll be all for it,
Yeah.
and yeah, that'd be awesome. But as soon as if that doesn't happen, then in a competitive environment, there's too many negatives.
Yep, fair enough.
If you're just using it for fun, yeah, it's awesome. It's so immersive. But if you want to be competitive, I'm not too sure to say yet.
Fair enough. Steve, do you think it's possible as well that if the cost comes down, it's actually more viable? Because one of the things I will say that I've noticed is people with VR sims, they can like tuck them in a corner. They can just like roll them in. Whereas with my 3 screens, it's like that's half the room now.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a space saver for sure. Compared to the screens, I don't know. We'll have to see. But yeah, it is expensive. It definitely is. Some of them are 4 figures for the set.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely a sort of a high-end market. Hopefully, it can become more mainstream once it comes down in price. But it might be might be a few years at least before that starts to happen.
In terms of game, where's your recommendation if someone were to start out in terms of gear, in terms of game, Steve?
So for me, if you want sort of an easier experience, one that doesn't cost too much, you could probably just start on console. Something like Forza Motorsport or Gran Turismo doesn't cost too much, and you can easily play it on controller, so you don't have to go out and buy a wheel. But if you do want to buy a wheel, you could buy something like a Logitech G29. Doesn't cost too much, and even on those sorts of games, especially Gran Turismo, I think you can get really good quality racing. You can do, depends exactly which race you get into, but I'll say on console, those sorts of games are a good starting point.
And for you, Jan, what's your recommendation if someone maybe now sitting at home, unfortunately, with this situation that we're in, wants to get involved? What's your recommendation?
Well, I've been playing Gran Turismo for years, and that's not just because I've come from that. I don't have a PC still. I've just played Gran Turismo, and if someone wanted to just get into sim racing, buy GT Sport, get yourself a Thrustmaster, the official world TGT, I think it's called, or a T500 or a G29, and it's quite forgiving the way that the Gran Turismo have set up things. So like the online racing is kind of similar to iRacing, where you have like a safety rating, you have like your ranking. So you're never really put in a room where you get demolished by
someone driving backwards. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you start off at the low, but you've got to kind of prove yourself that you're a clean racer, and the races can be really enjoyable. I've been playing that for years.
Yeah.
Certainly that's the best step. I play Forza as well, but I'm not into that. It's a bit weird for me.
Yeah, bit more arcadey. It's fun, but yeah, a bit different experience.
Yeah, but certainly get yourself a wheel for the next level experience of just having fun, knowing what a car feels like, and certain race cars or road cars feel like. Get yourself a wheel. It's just the immersion's better.